From first overall contenders to some really nice depth swings on upside, this year's USA-based draft class for the 2026 NHL draft class is a fascinating one. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the top prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. On today's episode, we'll be breaking down my neck of the woods, the region that I've been scouting here this season and last, focusing on the USA, the USHL and the NCAA specifically for draft-eligible talents, and that includes the likes of Gavin McKenna and Keaton Verhoeff, as well as some nice depth options who are steadily rising up our boards, like Wyatt Cullen and Landon Hafele. There's a lot of guys to kind of keep an eye on here this season. And now that we've completed our November rankings at Elite Prospects, which we did cover here on the podcast as well, if you do want to check out our coverage of it and a breakdown of the rankings. But we're focusing specifically on my region here. So we'll be talking about the players, what they do, how they project to the National Hockey League, what they have to do to get there, as well as where I personally had them slotted among my USA ranked players compared to where they ended up amongst this specific crop in our November rankings at Elite Prospects. For the most part, pretty similar between where I had them ranked and where they ended up on our boards, but definitely a couple exceptions to that rule that I think are going to be interesting to kind of dig into here on today's episode. So strap yourselves in, make yourselves comfortable. We'll be really focusing on the top end first round candidates here in the first segment before moving on to the second round guys that we did have ranked before wrapping it up in the third segment, looking at the 4 honorable mentions who did not get a number grade, but are close enough to consideration for us as second round potential talents that we have them slotted in as HMs. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into it. And we're going to not spend too much time talking about Gavin McKenna, Keaton Verhoeff, and Tynan Lawrence, since we just talked about them on the last episode about the 8 potential first overall candidates in this year's draft class, those 3 being amongst them, and Gavin McKenna, of course, being the favorite, and it's his spot to lose, but his grasp is slipping a little bit at the moment. If you want to hear more about that, the link is down in the description down below to check it out. But we'll be talking also about a pair of NTDP players here in the first segment. So to keep a bit more time for them, we will speed through the 3 big names here a little bit, but it has to be mentioned that there is such a distinct drop-off in upside and talent in potential between the top 3 among USA-based talents and the rest of the pack. Gavin McKenna, most dynamic player in this year's draft class. He oozes confidence and deception. Very like Ivan Demidov-esque in terms of his puck touches. Just isn't as physically developed as Demidov was in his draft year. So definitely some player comps there to kind of get fans excited. But McKenna's a special talent. And if he drops from first overall, a team is going to get a player with that just elite superstar potential in terms of on-puck abilities, but there's definitely still a lot to iron out in terms of the consistency, the defensive implications, the engagement, the motor. And yet, I still think that he is the favorite to go first overall at the end of the day, but we'll keep seeing how things progress here as the year wears on. And he's competing mostly, I think, with Keaton Verhoeff, among other USA-based players, another NCAA talent here who switched over from the CHL in the offseason, this time coming from the WHL and the Victoria Royals. And Verhoeff is a incredibly aggressive defenseman. He's always stepping up in the neutral zone to kill rushes right at the root. He's a player who loves to unleash his cannon of a shot in the offensive zone. He's used as a trigger man on the power play, Shea Weber-esque in terms of his deployment on the man advantage, and he has the release to justify it. But he pairs that with some really slick mitts, a penchant for some really high-end passes as well. So he's got the vision, he's got skill, he's a quick thinker, and just, again, very aggressive. He does not hold back. So does he overextend sometimes? Yes. Does he make mistakes? Absolutely. But he's always trying things, and he's always exploring the boundaries of what he's able to do on the ice. And I think that's the mark of a player who's going to keep improving for a very long time, and a player who's going to really hit a very high potential in the National Hockey League. And to have that in a 6'4" right shot defenseman of all profiles, which is one of the most coveted things in the National Hockey League, that just adds value to it. So he may not be the favorite at this point to end up at first overall, but I would not even raise an eyebrow if he heard his name called there at the end of the day, because he has a really special collection of skills. He has incredibly high upside on both the defensive and offensive side of the puck, in my opinion. So very, very interesting prospect there. And to move on, we've got Tynan Lawrence, the top centerman in the 2026 NHL draft, and easily the second best forward in the USA among draft eligibles this season. It's not even a competition. He's just got that locked and loaded. It's set because he is a unique player for this year's draft class. He's very young. He's just about a month off of being eligible for the 2027 class as an August 08 birthday. He's an average build for a center. He's 6 feet tall, 185 pounds of the left shot. But what he brings is incessant pace, lots of speed, lots of dynamism off the rush at high speed. He's able to execute some really nice playmaking maneuvers. The handling skill is certainly something that stands out in his best games. And he's the captain for Muskegon here this season. Has only gotten into 4 games so far this campaign. Struggled with some injuries out of training camp, but he was the player that won them the championship in the USHL Clark Cup last season. He was the best player in the entire USHL as a 16-year-old. And that is, I think, something that we can't minimize, even though he's been injured for much of this season so far. Tynan Lawrence has every marker of a future top 6 center in the National Hockey League. The two-way sense, the intelligence, the defensive motor, the habits, the sense of timing of when he wants to actually be aggressive and close his gaps and when he wants to stick in position to set the structure defensively. This is a guy who makes high-level reads at high pace, and I think he's going to have a very easy time translating to the NCAA as he makes the jump to Boston University next season. And the jump to pro hockey should be a relatively linear one a couple years after that. So you probably have a third line NHL center within 3 years time after the draft, and could be a top 6er within a year after that. So Tynan Lawrence, very, very fun player. But we move on to the pair of NTDP boys here who round out our top 35 in our rankings. So you see we're falling from our first overall pick in Gavin McKenna, our 4th overall ranked player in Keaton Verhoeff, and our 7th overall ranked player in Tynan Lawrence, dripping all the way down to 27th overall with Casey Mutryn from the NTDP. He is, as of recently, the captain of the program. He was wearing the C there at the top prospects game against the CHL. He's also young for the draft class, as a July 5th birthday. And he's a power winger through and through. 6'3", 201 pounds, right shot, very heavy, goes to the middle of the ice, can clear the net front, really good screening goaltenders, decent hand-eye coordination and tight. But more than anything, what he does is just so consistently and powerfully bring pucks from the boards to the middle of the ice. That's one of the most high-value things for your wingers to do in the National Hockey League, and Mutryn excels at it. And through it, he's also shown some really impressive flashes of playmaking ability. So that combination of vision, intelligence, power, just dragging the puck from the perimeter right into the danger zone, That's what Mutryn does to a pretty high level. And the production's been inconsistent, but the same can be said for every single player on that team this season. It's been rough. As a reminder, they lost every single game they played in October, and November was better, largely because of the U18 Five Nations tournament against their own age group. But that being said, I think Casey Mutryn is a really interesting top round potential prospect who has a lot more upside than perhaps he's given his credit for as well, partially due to the situation there this season. But what he does bring is a pretty high floor with a checking upside is very intense, very heavy. He'll be able to play bottom six checking role in the National Hockey League, barring some real developmental mishaps. But the upside, I think, really extends to a second line role as a complementary banger who is able to really create space for the top players on his line. Last but not least here for this first segment, we've got Victor Plante, the overtime hero in that game, or in the series, the showdown against the CHL top prospects. He won in super OT, and he's a player who outworks competition. He's the younger brother of Zam and Max Plante, who are currently lighting it up together as line mates in the NCAA. And Victor Plante is a high motor and highly intelligent playmaker. And he's been playing this season largely on the wing. He's gotten some games as well at center, but I think as a projection, we're probably talking a winger here. But he's really shown upside, even as an F1 on the forecheck with that high stride rate, high motor. Not the cleanest skater in the world, but he has a pretty good top speed because of just how quickly he moves his feet. And he's a guy that I think definitely has some potential as a middle six forward in the National Hockey League. And that's why we had him ranked at 35th overall here in our November rankings at Elite Prospects. He's one of the favorites of our head scout, Mitch Brown. And he's definitely grown on me over the course of the season. He was the primary offensive driver that this team had prior to the arrival of Wyatt Cullen back from injury, who is now kind of stepping into that role as the most dynamic forward on the team. But now they're able to split that in terms of not one player needing to carry the entire burden of offensive generation in this lineup. But that wraps things up here for the first segment. In the next one, we'll keep digging into the second round players that we have ranked before wrapping things up with the honorable mentions. But before we do that, we've got a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, and even my skin. That's why I've been using DripDrop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day might look like. DripDrop is not your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. I like using DripDrop as part of my daily routine. I'll mix a packet in the morning before the gym or during that midday slump. Hydration has become an absolute non-negotiable for me. DripDrop helps me keep me feel sharp, calm, and honestly just good overall. Right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard, and keep your body and mind performing at their best with DripDrop. All right, let's keep this show rolling here as we're breaking down our top ranked players from this USA draft class. And just to recap there, the first segment, Gavin McKenna, of course, was also number 1 on my board among USA-based players. Same thing can be said with Keaton Verhoeff and Tynan Lawrence at numbers 2 and 3. There was no divergence there. Same thing with Casey Mutryn. He was my 4th USA player, and he was our 4th USA player ranked in our rankings. So within the first round, there was nothing changed between what I would have personally done and what ended up there on our rankings. But where there was a bit of a discrepancy was with Victor Plante. I had him ranked as my 11th top player, which might be a little bit low, but I think I'm a little bit lower than Mitch Brown is on Victor Plante. But he finished as our 5th top USA prospect. But as soon as we get into this second round range and Victor Plante is squarely within that, in my view, it gets incredibly tight. So even though there might be 6 spots separating those players between my rankings and our final board, doesn't really mean as much in terms of the gaps between them. So to kick off the second segment, we're going with a guy that I had ranked higher than he actually went in our board, and that is Ilia Morozov, the big physical center playing in the NCAA this season against all expectations, really, coming into the year. And he's playing with the University of Miami, Ohio, which is a program that struggled massively last season, but got off to an incredibly hot start here this year. And Morozov, as the youngest player on the team, the youngest player in all of college this year, was their first line center. And he did a fantastic job throughout the first months. He's slowed down a little bit in terms of the offensive production here recently, but Morozov is very, very direct. He gets to the middle of the ice. He's a bulldozer, net front galore in terms of he's incredibly difficult to move from those positions, and he's nightmarish to deal with in those situations. He has a good release, good catch and release, good snapshot, gets it off quickly, decent power on it. Nothing fancy with him. He doesn't try to outdangle or outmaneuver opponents. He's not overly agile. The handling skill isn't above average by any stretch of the imagination, and the skating is average at best as well. So he doesn't really have those evasive tools. So instead, he's just a battering ram of a player who just goes to where he needs to be, does not take detours, and will carry everything between him and his destination with him in his path. So he's a very fun player, in my opinion. He's got some real nice defensive upside as well. Finished at 36th on our board, right after Victor Plante at 35. So as the 6th top player from the USA and my personal 5th top prospect from the region. Next, we've got Luke Schairer, the big mobile right shot defenseman from the NTDP, and a player that's been really interesting to kind of follow here this season, because there's certain elements that make him incredibly interesting as a first-round caliber guy, but the actual proactiveness, the involvement, the engagement, the impact has been much closer to a third-round caliber player than a first so far this season. So we've kind of offset that with having him in the early second round, because the tools are fantastic. He already looks like an NHL player, the way he moves, the way he's built. He's really big, 6'3", 201 pounds as a right shot defenseman, really big customer. But 6 assists in 22 games so far this season in all competitions, 39 penalty minutes. His time on ice has definitely increased here over the last month, but was relatively low for decent stretches, like hovering around the 13 minutes a night mark from the blue line and towards the bottom end of the NTDP defense core. And with Schairer, like I think he's at his best when he's more daring and he's trying to create than when he's just like sitting back into just a conservative style, which I did see him do quite a bit so far this season. But he's got the tools and he's got the elements to be a riser as well if his performances are able to catch up with the mechanics. But I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've watched him play, because he's one of the ones that I haven't pinned down yet. I can see, I can understand all the different arguments. I just don't quite know where I personally fall just yet. So I kind of just mitigated some of those, the question marks that I have with him. So he settled in a similar range for me as where he landed on our board. He was my 6th top ranked player and up to our 7th, but anywhere there between like in an early second round. He was 38th overall on our board in the end. I think that's the right range for a player with these tools. There's a bit of a drop off in terms of players with both high end tools and a decently high floor this season that I think hits a bit earlier than maybe we expected it to in the draft rankings. But Luke Schairer is a very interesting player. Next up, we've got Adam Valentini, who finished at 42nd overall in our top 50 rankings. My 9th best player in the region, finished as our 8th top ranked guy, so right there in the mix. And he's a very hard-working forward playing in the NCAA this season with the University of Michigan. And he's been an important part of that team. He's playing top 6 minutes, more nice than he isn't. He's collecting points with 5 goals and 16 points in 17 games. And he's doing that as an undersized forward. He's 5'11", 185 pounds, but that doesn't allow himself to be outworked by anybody on the ice. This guy's got a motor and a half. and he uses that to just gain the inside, be pesty, be difficult to play against. He's not fancy. You're not going to see him dangle or outmaneuver a whole bunch of players. He's not dynamic with the puck on his stick, but he is direct. He is pacey. He is good on the counter attack and disruptive defensively, and he makes his value seen in all three zones. So with that type of mentality, with that type of impact, I definitely see an NHL role in his future as a bottom six kind of guy. And I think the question mark here is more like, is that going to be on a third line or a fourth line? And if you're a believer that it's a top 9 role, then I think it's definitely worth a swing there between 25 and 40, which I think is currently the tier where teams will be starting to look at this player. But we wrap things up here for the second segment with the last player that we had ranked in our top 50 from the USA, and that is Wyatt Cullen, our big riser, who I would put down a pretty penny that he's going to end up at least 10 spots higher than 44, where he did on this rankings on our final board. This guy has got a load of skill. He's the most dynamic player with the NTDP, but he's only just returned from injury in early November. But he's still a guy that, has been gaining a lot more enthusiasm around the group. We just have to log some more viewings to catch up compared to the rest of the draft class. But he's a guy that, with a bit more consistency in his offensive creation, I think he's got the handling skill, the playmaking, the skating ability, the pace shifts, the delays to really just tear teams open. And he was a massive standout there at the showcase as well, the Top Prospects Showdown. So I think that Wyatt Cullen's definitely a name to keep your eyes on if you're tracking from home, because this guy's going to be rocketing up boards. I could easily see him finish between, 17th and 25th overall by year's end, at least for myself personally. We'll see how high I'm able to kind of rise that tide within our debates internally at Elite Prospects. But Wyatt Cullen is a very interesting player with significant potential, in my opinion, with top 6 level skill. And since coming back from injury, he's played 6 games and he's got 7 points in them with the NTDP. And they look a whole lot better with a true central focal point to their attack. And Wyatt Cullen gives them that just truly dynamic threat night in, night out. But that wraps things up here for the second segment. In the final one, we'll wrap it up with our honorable mentions. But before we do that, we've got a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's wrap up the show here as we only have 4 more names to discuss, and those are the ones that we had ranked in our honorable mentions. But before we fully do that, just wanted to maybe read out what my actual rankings were here for my region for you listeners in terms of my top 15 prospects. Or 16 that I had actually listed as HM caliber. So, of course, Gavin McKenna, Keaton Verhoeff, and Tynan Lawrence at 1, 2, and 3. Very clear. Then Casey Mutryn and Ilia Morozov as the 2 big power forwards at 4 and 5. Luke Schairer at number 6. Jack Hextall, who we'll talk about here in a second, the playmaker out of the Youngstown Phantoms in the USHL at number 7, followed by the skilled handler Blake Zielinski, and then Adam Valentini at number 9, Wyatt Cullen at 10, Victor Plante at 11, Landon Hafele at number 12, Landon Nix, the right shot defenseman out of UMass, at 13, and then Evan Jardine, Aurelio Garcia, and Mikey Berchild to wrap up my 14, 15, and 16th ranked slots. You have other names that are interesting enough that I think deserve some consideration in terms of these conversations and top 50 or top 64 rankings. Guys like Lincoln Keene from ASU, Jackson Marthaler from the NTDP, Parker Trottier, an underrated checking forward from the NTDP as well. And maybe even Dakota Rayon Mullen, re-entry, who went undrafted last year and has been running things offensively for the University of Michigan here this campaign as an undersized left shot defenseman. There's a lot to like in this year's draft class among USA-based prospects, but let's focus here on wrapping things up among the ones that we did actually rank, who did make the cut as honorable mentions, and we'll kick things off with Jack Hextall of the Youngstown Phantoms. He is an average size, 6 foot, 185-pound right shot center who's got really good playmaking abilities. He's a high IQ player. He's really driven through his intelligence, and he's playing, as I mentioned, with Youngstown here this season, and he's committed to joining Michigan State University next year. So he's going off to a very strong program where he'll be playing with guys, I mean, if they stay, guys like Hayden Lindstrom and Porter Martone, if they're still there next season. That could be really interesting for a guy like Hextall. But what he brings really is that IQ. It is the details of the game. Very, very detailed, solidly defensive player. But the question here is, can he either improve his shot to become a bit more diverse offensively and really be dynamic with the puck on his stick, or find some other element that becomes elite if his playmaking can really bring him over the hump to be a top 6 level guy in the National Hockey League. Right now, we see more of a bottom sixer, maybe third line upside down the middle. But even then, he lacks some physicality, but he's got the work ethic, and he has 12 points in 22 games this season, really running things offensively for his team, playing a big role. He's an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Landon Hafele is another guy who's just an engine for his team in the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers, one of the oldest players for this year's draft class, just 3 days off the cutoff for that 2025 draft that just passed in June. And Hafele has 19 points in 19 games this season with Green Bay. He was playing Ashley last season almost exclusively with the U18 NTDP. So with guys like William Moore and Jack Murtagh and so on and so forth from last year's class. And this year, Landon Hafele, instead of being a checking wing on the third line, is a top line checker. He's still a checker. He's a thoroughbred high motor player through and through. Average size again at 6 feet, 187 pounds, but he outworks everybody on the ice. You're never bored watching him play. He's always trying to disrupt something at underneath opponents' sticks and their skins alike. And overall, this guy's got some decent attacking chops on the break in transition as well when he's attacking at speed. So Hafele playing a really big role for his team, wins a lot of puck battles. He's a guy to keep an eye on. He certainly won my appreciation here this season. Then we've got Blake Zielinski from the Des Moines Buccaneers, has played a couple of games here as well with the U18 NTDP at the Top Prospects Showcase, but was basically the 13th forward there, so didn't really do all that much in limited ice time. But this is a player with some really impressive skill attributes. The consistency has been a bit of a question mark this season, and there's a reason he did not crack our top 50 despite having first-round caliber skill. He has 15 points in 18 games this season, only 3 goals to show for having an absolutely wicked shot. His one-timer, his snapshot, the amount of pace he's able to get on the elevation from in tight, the quickness of his release. He's got one of the best shots in the entire USA-based draft class, and there aren't many players competing for that award, and he's definitely one of those. But beyond that, beyond the strong handling ability, there's a lot of inconsistency in terms of his off-puck engagement. Certain shifts, he's really hard working on the back check. Other shifts, he can't even be bothered to check over his shoulder to see if there's someone gliding into his blind spot in the defensive zone. There's definitely those breakdowns of defensive habits with Blake Zielinski. And overall, I think that he's a lot more of an improviser offensively than a player who thrives within a structure. So he's also the profile of player that might stumble a little bit more as he goes up the ranks and the levels where he has to change the way he plays the game to be a lot more team-oriented and system-focused than it is at the moment. But still a player that, because he has that skill, still has some second-line upside in terms of the pure tools that he has at his disposal. And last but not least here for this episode, we've got Mikey Berchild, an undersized winger from the NTDP, 5'10", 181 pounds, and he's incredibly hardworking. He's got a very high motor at his disposal. He's a guy that is constantly trying to switch lanes, attack at angles, really creating through speed. And he does sometimes overcomplicate things unnecessarily with the puck on his stick, where maybe his hands are moving quicker than his brain is. I still think that he's a guy that, at his best, he's just attacking the middle of the ice, the slot. He's a very middle-driven player for a guy that's not the biggest. And he's also shown some dynamic skating and puck skills of really attacking at speed at high paces, being able to link plays together with some skilled handling moves. And he's able to also flash some playmaking creativity and finish plays in tight. But so far this season, he's got 5 goals and 14 points in 19 games with the program. But a lot of that came at the U18 Five Nations tournament. He had 7 points in 4 games there. It's been slower going against the USHL and NCAA competition the rest of the season, but he's definitely a guy that has some very intriguing aspects to his toolkit. He reminds me a little bit of a slightly lower upside, higher floor version of LJ Mooney from last year. I just don't think he's as special. And I think that the reason that LJ Mooney went as high as he did on draft day is because he is that special with the puck on his stick. But still, Mikey Berchild, a very interesting player to keep an eye on, and definitely worth the honorable mention that he ended up earning in our rankings. And if you want to check out the full rankings, they will be linked in the description down below for you to read, as well as our full ranking meeting that we had at Elite Prospects. And we have 2 previous episodes as well, breaking down these rankings. One of them diving into all 50 picks. So if you want like a quick fire rundown of every single guy in our rankings, that's the one for you. And then the second one specifically about the debate at first overall with the 8 top candidates for that spot at year's end. But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do leave us a like and a comment down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always greatly appreciated. And for your second listen, you're going to head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything that you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. But that is it here. Thank you so much for tuning in as always, and I'll catch you listening again very, very soon.